Folks, the National Insecurity Seminar, which is a week from this coming Friday, the 7th of June. Yes, it's going to be June already. The 7th of June, 7th, 8th, and 9th. Joe and I will be attending with the lovely and very gracious Susan Price, the Gold Star mother of Aaron Kenneth, who was essentially executed. He was a Marine, is a Marine. He was also a CIA asset, and he was executed in the Battle of Ganjgal in Afghanistan on September 9th, 2009. I got to tell you, it's a very troubling story. But the reason I mention that is we invite everyone to the very free seminar, the presentation at the Mount Pisgah Church in Apex, North Carolina. Joe and I will be backing up Susan Price. We'll be giving a presentation as well on Saturday, and we'll also be there on Sunday for the service, and of course Susan will be speaking on Friday. So the attendance is extremely limited now, and I know I talked to Susan earlier today, both Joe and I did, and she said that there's not too many spaces left. So if you're close and you can go, definitely go to HomelandSecurityUS.com, click on the National Insecurity Seminar box, and it'll explain the schedule, it'll give you the itinerary, and then there's a link there for the registration page, and you can sign up there. Before we hit the news, I just want to say this: Northeast Intelligence Network, of course, our home base, HomelandSecurityUS.com. There's an article there, also published in CanadaFreePress.com. The question over Obama's missing time, the 18 and a half hours, as compared to the 18 and a half minutes on the Nixon tapes. The question regarding what he did during that time period deepens. Now, I first brought this up with a pretty high degree of specificity in my article titled The Benghazi Deception. I wrote that on May 16th, where I compared Obama's missing 18 and a half hours during the time 4 Americans were being murdered to the 18 and a half minute erasure of the Watergate tapes. Now, 1 week later, I clearly illustrated that Chris Wallace repeatedly asked David Pfeiffer, a top Obama official, where was Obama during that night when 4 Americans were murdered in Benghazi. Now, Mr. Wallace did what any good newsman would do. He relentlessly went after the answer. He asked the question to Obama's top aide 8 times. Folks, 8 times. No answer, no explanation, nothing. Despite this tenacity, despite his persistence, Mr. Pfeiffer continually dodged this question, called his, meaning Obama's, whereabouts irrelevant, and basically told the American people to pound salt. That's right. They lied to you and I. And I put up in this article today, folks, have you ever, well, let me talk to the people right now who have raised teenagers. Look, I raised 4. You know, ladies and gentlemen, that it's a parent's need to know. The parents' need to know is directly proportional to the teenagers' need to keep their silence about some event in which they have engaged. In other words, the quieter they are about something, or the more lies or the more deflection you get from the teenager, you know something's up. The harder they fight to keep their misdeeds under wraps, of course, the more important it is for the responsible parent to learn exactly what took place. Well, in the case of the 4 Americans who were murdered that night, and a commander-in-chief who was obviously missing in action, the American people not only deserve to know, But as responsible Americans, we need to know the location and activities of Obama during this period of murder and mayhem. Now, I want to say this. The stakes were raised just 2 days ago when an article by Kevin Dujan in Hill Buzz, under the title "Barack Obama was high on cocaine during the missing hours of the Benghazi attack last September." This article was published 2 days ago. Now, Dujan wrote, "If you've ever known anyone who's a drug addict, you'd see it's obvious that Obama was high on cocaine the night of Benghazi. It's the only logical explanation for his disappearance." Who said this? Kevin Dujan of Hill Buzz. Okay.
And this is based on what?
Well, this is based on up close and personal understanding of seeing people under the influence of drugs.
Okay, well, if Obama wasn't around...
See, he was last seen at 5 o'clock. Okay, here's the deal, folks. Just so and I'll tell you why this is important here in a second. He was last seen. We know where he was at 5 o'clock on 9/11. 5 o'clock Eastern time. 5 o'clock Washington local time. He was with Defense Secretary Leon Panetta and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Martin Dempsey. Now, Dujan writes that Dujan cites Rich Lowry's article at Politico about the mystery night on September 11th. Okay, when Obama disappeared for many hours and seemingly was unavailable, despite the fact that the U.S. ambassador the first U.S. ambassador in 30 years had been murdered in the line of duty. The bottom line here is, from roughly 5 o'clock that afternoon, with the exception of a 10 p.m. Eastern time approximate call or conversation with Hillary Clinton, he was not seen until 10:35 a.m. on 9/12 of 12. So picture this. He leaves this meeting at 5 p.m. or thereabouts on 9/11. 10:35 that night on 9/11, he talks with Hillary Clinton. Or I'm sorry, 10 o'clock that night, he talks with Hillary Clinton. 10:35 a.m. is when he's actually seen, when he pretended the Benghazi attack was about some YouTube video. Then he disappeared again until he boarded his plane for Las Vegas at 2:20 p.m. Washington time that day. So really, it's much longer than 18 and a half hours. But the bottom line here is, you've got a commander-in-chief in that capacity as commander-in-chief as missing in action. And according to the article written by Mr. Dujan from Hill Buzz, he said, hey, if you've ever known anyone who's a drug addict, you'd see it's obvious that Obama was high on cocaine the night of Benghazi. It's the only logical explanation for his disappearance and the White House's refusal to comment on what he was doing at the time, since this was a night of great crisis for our country. The only logical reason that the White House won't explain where the president was is if this man was high as a kite on illegal narcotics at the time. Well, it's interesting because Mr. Dujan also commented about an email that he received from his friend Justine, an actress and model who ran in some interesting, if not salacious, shall we say, circles back in the 1970s with closeted gay men such as Rock Hudson. Now, according to the article, Justine's first instinct is that Obama might have been with, and we're talking in a biblical sense here, he might have been with Reggie Love and didn't want to be disturbed. Now, personally, I don't believe the Reggie Love aspect of this, but I've got to tell you this. and then I'm going to turn this over to Joe for some real news, or some news. I had spoken with, and I'll tell you this, ladies and gentlemen, I consider it a privilege. I had the privilege of speaking with Larry Sinclair, of interviewing him. And I say privilege because this guy, Larry Sinclair, literally put his life on the line. He is the author of Barack Obama and Larry Sinclair, Cocaine, Sex, Lies, and Murder. Now, I know some of you folks that are joining us tonight did not hear last night's show. I know we've got some new listeners tonight. I don't know if it was 16, 17, 18 months ago I first encountered Larry Sinclair. And I heard a story that I found absolutely incredible. Larry Sinclair told me, and folks, you might want to cover your ears. I'll say this gently, okay, but understand what's coming is very unpleasant. Larry Sinclair told me that he performed oral sex on Barack Hussein Obama in the back of a car in Chicago when Obama was an Illinois state senator. And in fact, he did blow. In other words, he did cocaine with Obama while Obama smoked cocaine. Not only that, he did it the next day. Okay. Now, supposedly Larry Sinclair failed a lie detector test. Not true. Not true at all. Guarantee you 100% that is absolutely not true. To make a long story short, and I'm not going to dwell on this, but I really, really put Larry Sinclair through some hoops in terms of, are you serious? Who are you? What, did you just happen to stroll into Chicago and through some homosexual lottery pick up Barack Obama? I mean, really? Is that what you did? I mean, folks, you have to understand, this is my approach to Larry Sinclair. And to his credit, he answered every single question that I asked him. And I asked him many questions in many different ways. The bottom line was he never wavered from his answers. And just to cut it short here, I did go through a lot of his information and found that he did produce receipts that backed up what he was telling me. He produced evidence, if you will. Not, of course, not. There's no blue dress here, folks, Lewinsky style. No, there's nothing like that. But as far as I'm concerned, he produced enough prima facie evidence to convince me, an investigator of 25 years, that something indeed did happen. And in fact, Obama was with Larry Sinclair on the night in question, on the nights and the following day in question, and in fact had contact with him, and subsequent to that, and also had threats by people close to Obama during his presidential aspirations. Folks, we are going to have Larry Sinclair on our show as soon as our schedules permit. I think you'll find Larry Sinclair to be pretty upfront, pretty upfront. I believe the guy. Okay, well, let me just tell you that I believe the guy, and I think that it's going to be a good show when we have him on. So I'm looking forward to that. Why would we have him on? Because this does go right back to the hour or the day of 9/11/2012, and what Obama was doing during that missing time period. And believe me, folks, I had an intelligence, someone very close in the intelligence industry says, if you are able to grab and authenticate or obtain and authenticate the logs, the Secret Service, the White House logs, you will find out where Obama was, who he was with, and from there be able to deduce what he was doing. And let me say this, it would not be the first time. Do we have a problem? We have a problem. Do I believe what I've heard from my intelligence sources concerning Obama's proclivities, activities, and even the engineering, because it's a feat of engineering to be able to do this in the manner which it is? Yes, I believe.
Well, I mean, what's the difference, though? I mean, we see him in the White House during the staged Osama bin Laden raid, and all the fake photos came out, the lies about the timeline and what he witnessed. I mean,
I'm glad you asked that question.
It doesn't matter if this guy's in his office or not.
I got to tell you something. That was my original thought. Does it matter? Because, okay, think, folks that are old enough like me, think back to the JFK time, the scandals, when JFK reportedly had, well, not reportedly, as it turned out, did have one woman who he shared with a mafia boss who happened to be a spy for the Russians. Could this not be situations like this? Could this not weaken our intelligence? Could this not be something that could cause perhaps a situation where we don't want this information to get out? So could this not allow blackmail, pave the way to blackmail, pave the way to something more treacherous than what the act is itself? Do you know where I'm going with this?
Yeah, and I would maybe feel different if there was the country was in a state where it was vulnerable, but we're well beyond vulnerable.
I don't know about that. I think we still have areas of vulnerability we have to be very concerned with.
And the economy is going to collapse. We're going to see these new world order people do whatever they're going to do. It's really out of our hands. And Obama's facing all these quote-unquote scandals, and they're having all these quote-unquote hearings where nothing will come of anything, and none of it's of any importance.
Well, okay, I agree with you to the extent that when you have a holder investigating holder, which ultimately is what is happening. Now, we're not going to have anything come of this, of course not. But once again, I refer to my conversation with the person within the intelligence community. And we were talking about special prosecutors. We were talking about Watergate. We were talking about that time period. We were talking about the Clinton time period. We cannot afford, we don't have the time for special prosecutors. We need to do something more drastic than that. I agree with you to an extent, Joe, that it's late in the day. But we still have to fight. We still have to put up that fight. Don't you think?
I agree we have to put up a fight, but pick your battles, I guess. This is one where, I mean, regardless of where he was, it still happened.
Well,
orders were given, people stood down, people did not go to fight in Benghazi.
Okay.
Regardless of that, even if they prove that beyond a reasonable doubt, nothing will come of it. It is all distraction for these people who are stuck believing in political systems.
Okay, now hold on to that thought for a second and follow my logic on this. When you say nothing will happen, think about when a person becomes, when a person has been an asset to an operation, and suddenly becomes a liability. What happens to that person?
Now you're talking about them being
yes,
open for anything.
Right. This is what I'm getting at. This is what we're seeing, I believe. I truly believe we are seeing Obama being set up to take the fall. Now, boy, this is so difficult to talk about because there's so many dynamics at play, so much dynamics at play here, so many dynamics. I'm not sure the correct term, but you get the picture. You've got scandals which are not scandals; they're crimes. You've got criminal activity. You've had criminal activity since day one. You've got the Chicago mob in power. Think back to Rahm Emanuel. Think back to the Chicago mob people that were in power, the Axelrods and so on and so forth. Valerie Jarrett, Chicago mob. Valerie Jarrett's the gatekeeper of the White House. She's actually running the White House. America is a captured operation. We need to get, there's obviously the spiritual component which we need to address and keep in the forefront. But in the meantime, we cannot simply allow mischief, disorder, disruption, dysfunction to continue. As Christians, we have a responsibility, I believe. Do we not? Because we have to hold those in power accountable to us. Now, they're going to be held accountable to a much higher power at a given day. But don't you think that we as Americans, that we as Christians, that we as fathers and sons, brothers and sisters, grandparents, mothers and fathers and so on, don't you think that it is important that we hold these people accountable for what's going on? What do you think? I want to know.
Who's we? And these people won't be held accountable, at least not from what I see, maybe not in this life. But things are just moving so fast. I mean, the news out of Syria and the Middle East today is explosive. There's so much going on. Weapons shipments.
Let's talk about this. Let's talk about Syria, because Benghazi is all about Syria, or Syria is all about Benghazi, whichever you prefer.
Benghazi was a result of what they were going to achieve in Syria, and that was shipping weapons to the rebels, the rebel fighters. And
folks, it wasn't about a kidnapping gone awry. Please don't fall for that. Please don't send me another email about that.
Either way, the U.S. personnel did die, and we have an escalating problem in Syria. Now, the president has asked the Pentagon for Syria no-fly zone. There was breaking news of this just before the show started. Here's CNN.
Now, a lot of developments in the war in Syria. The Russian ambassador to the UN tells CNN's Christiana Mampour that, yes, delegates from the Assad regime will be attending proposed peace talks in Geneva, but it's still unclear if the Syrian rebels will be joining them. And the European Union decided to end the arms embargo against Syrian rebels. Russia's response? To go ahead with the delivery of surface-to-air missiles to the Syrian government, to keep things from getting out of hand. But the biggest news may be coming from the White House. Josh Rogan is the senior correspondent for Newsweek Daily Beast, and he joins me now with an exclusive. Josh, before we get to your exclusive, I want to play something that President Obama said about his options in Syria back in April.
As early as last year, I asked the Pentagon, our military, our intelligence officials to prepare for me what options might be available. And I won't go into the details of what those options might be.
So he wouldn't go into the details what those options might be, but you now have some exclusive reporting on what at least one of them is.
Exactly. We've discovered that the White House has tasked the Joint Chiefs of Staff to plan for a no-fly zone inside Syria that would be done on a multilateral basis with countries such as France and Britain. This wouldn't be a NATO option like in Libya. It wouldn't be a UN option. It would be U.S. and countries that are willing to participate, and those plans are being drawn up, and that is new information.
And this is a story that you're breaking right now in the Newsweek, the Daily Beast. I want to read something an administration official told you that's in your story. Quote, the White House is still in contemplation mode, but the planning is moving forward, and it's more advanced than it's ever been. all this effort to pressure the regime is part of the overall effort to find a political solution. But what happens if Geneva fails? It's only prudent to plan for other options beyond Geneva. Talk us through how the diplomatic options are going at this point.
Right. We've got a dual-track strategy. The Obama administration wants a politically negotiated solution between the regime and the opposition. The upcoming conference in Geneva is the best chance to do that. But most people think that that's likely to fail. The opposition wants Assad to go. Assad's not going to agree to go.
No.
So we have to plan for options after Geneva. And it's not just the no-fly zone. They're also considering arming the Syrian opposition, elements of it that are moderate and who support the United States, and switching recognition from the Assad regime to the opposition. So there's a menu of options that the Obama administration is now considering more than ever, if and when the political solution becomes more and more unlikely.
And as if this scoop wasn't enough, you had another one yesterday about Senator John McCain, leading Republican, visiting with the Syrian rebels in Syria, the highest-ranking U.S. official to do so. Tell us about the significance of that visit.
Right. So John McCain is doing two things. He's communicating to the Syrian rebels that there are people in Washington who support arming them, who support greater intervention. And he's also collecting information to bring back to the United States about what they want, who they are, and how they're working together. He also proved that you can go into Syria and you can meet with the rebel leaders, and they will meet with you, and they are organized. And this has not happened before on such a high level. So now you can anticipate there are a lot more officials and lawmakers who will want to go into Syria and see what's going on there for themselves. Amazing.
Josh Rogan with Newsweek, The Daily Beast. Thanks so much. Great reporting as always.
That from CNN on the no-fly zone now. We have...
Wait, before you get into the second part of this, Joe, ladies and gentlemen, please listen to me. Please, I beg you, everyone listening to this program, CanadaFreePress.com, CanadaFreePress.com, HomelandSecurityUS.com. There are articles about Benghazi. If you click on the insider reports on Canada Free Press, you'll find them. If you go scroll down to, or just type in the search box on HomelandSecurityUS.com, Benghazi, 27 articles about Benghazi. Folks, here's the situation. There will be NATO involvement in Syria. That's already been decided.
That's already done.
Well, okay, I'm talking boots on the ground. You've got 80,000 dead. Look, folks, I almost want to cry. You've got families, Christians in Syria, the mothers, the fathers, the kids, they're dying. You've got 1 million refugees. These are being caused by the actions of Clinton, of Obama, of Axelrod, of Jarrett, McCain, of the Congress, whether Republican or Democrat. These are not human beings. These are globalist, elite, Luciferian bastards.
Yeah. And Senator John McCain, who traveled to Syria, we're going to be playing a clip from that, but he is pushing for more aggressive U.S. support of the Syrian rebels, a.k.a. Al-Qaeda, and he told the Daily Beast last week that despite the request for the plans, he doubts the White House will decide to implement a no-fly zone, but said this one thing about the Pentagon: if they don't want to do something, they'll tell you all sorts of reasons why they can't do it. It's going to take significant pressure for them to come up with a realistic plan. And McCain said a realistic plan for a no-fly zone would include hundreds of planes and would be most effective if it included destroying Syrian airplanes on runways, bombing those runways, moving U.S. Patriot missile batteries into Turkey to close the border so they could protect airspace inside northern Syria.
And all that's needed to be left is to look for the mushroom clouds, because what you're seeing, ladies and gentlemen, and the reason I am so harsh on this, and yes, I lost my temper, but I've got to tell you, you're looking at the run-up to this is World War III. This is global conflict. People will die. Millions are going to die. Children are going to die.
This is setting up alliances and allies and enemies, and they are not seeking or will not seek any type of congressional approval to take any military action in Syria, as they've done no such thing in the past for Libya or Egypt, even though Libya had a lot more. They had the no-fly zone. They had the arming of the rebels openly. But here, this has been going on since Libya really started, and it continues to get worse. And their answer is to give weapons to Al-Qaeda, while Russia is giving S-300 missiles to the Syrian government and anti-aircraft missiles to deter hotheads. They are on a race to arm the nations around Israel with the most deadly and effective weaponry they possibly can without making it look like they're doing it for an endgame result to come against Israel.
I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, for my passion. No, I'm not sorry for my passion. I'm sorry for my choice of words, but I've got to tell you, just as I told you, just as my source, it's not me. It's the people that talk to us who are very, very clear about what's taking place. We are seeing World War III and how history is going to record what's going to happen. If there will be anyone left to record history, well, there will be. But this began so long ago that the end has already been written. Folks, please understand what is taking place in Syria is going to touch the lives of every person on the planet. Everyone on the planet. This is not hyperbole. I've been beating the drum on this because the people who have been talking to me, multiple people within the intelligence community who have been talking to me have been saying this and saying this is going to happen next. And what you're hearing today is what we spoke about months ago. Folks, I am so very disturbed by what I'm hearing, by the findings that Joe had played. And go ahead and play that second clip.
Here's an inside McCain's secret trip to Syria.
Well, it was actually a very interesting trip. He came, the senator met with a total of about 18 commanders from the Free Syria Army under the supreme command of General Idris. He had 2 meetings in Gaziantep. The first meeting included 10 commanders. The second meeting was 4, and the third meeting, which was inside Syrian territory, had 5 commanders, all of which were attended by General Idris, the supreme commander of the Free Syria Army.
So how many hours was Senator McCain inside Syria proper?
About an hour.
About 1 hour. Was there ever any danger to the senator?
No, actually not at all. And I think it's testament to the Free Syria Army, which with very limited weapons and capabilities has been able to secure and liberate large swaths of areas in the north. The senator did not go too far deep into Syria. It was less than 1 kilometer in. And the meeting, again, took about 45 minutes to an hour. And then the Free Syria Army was incredibly cooperative. They didn't even stop the convoy. They let us come up right to the door for the room where the meeting took place, and it was incredibly productive.
What was the senator's message to the Free Syrian Army?
The senator, first of all, I think wanted to assure the Syrian people and the Free Syria Army that the people of the United States, in general, support their strive for freedom, support their revolution, which for 7 or 8 months was completely peaceful, and they were forced into taking up arms to defend against the Assad regime's massacres that were occurring against innocent people. He also discussed with them a few major issues. One was his concern about the increasing numbers of Hezbollah fighters that have been entering Syria and taking part in aiding Assad in oppressing his people. Also, the Revolutionary Guard from Iran that are also operating and taking part in combat operations inside of Syria. He also discussed briefly the use of chemical weapons, as well as what were the needs of the Free Syria Army. He also discussed the aspects of extremism that may have sort of popped up in certain parts of Syria, and to what extent that was, and what ways we could take to be able to marginalize any extremist groups that may have entered due to the lack of international intervention or aid.
What was the main message to Senator McCain from the Free Syrian Army, the rebels who are opposed to the regime of the President Bashar al-Assad?
The Free Syria Army really wanted to, first of all, we're incredibly appreciative. Some of these commanders came from places as far away as Homs, Qusair, Aleppo, Idlib province, and other provinces all over Syria just to meet the senator. And, we were helping coordinate them coming out. And what they wanted to say is, first of all, that thank you very much for taking the time and for coming to see them.
All right, that is a little bit of Wolf Blitzer interviewing somebody for talking, who represented the Free Syrian Army in McCain, and introduced him and showed him around his vacation. Yeah, and all this while we have Russia sending S-300 missiles to Syria, and here's a quick clip on that.
Russia has slammed the EU's decision to drop the Syria arms embargo as counterproductive towards finding a diplomatic solution. Moscow says it will continue to supply air defense missiles to Damascus, calling it a balance designed to deter foreign intervention in Syria. Well, we have in the studio our Sean Thomas for more on this. So, Sean, what's Moscow's reasoning behind delivering on the missile supply deal?
Well, the first thing you have to understand is these are old existing contracts that were signed before the Syrian conflict even began. So in some ways, Russia is obligated to fulfill these contracts. So that's the one way of looking at it. But it is interesting, the timing today, in the wake of the EU allowing this arms embargo to expire. This paves the way for different countries to individually start arming the rebels. So the Foreign Ministry and the Russian President's office, they have expressed their disappointment in this decision, saying that it undermines the international peace process, something that they've been working very hard for. In fact, this week, Lavrov and Kerry meeting to try and get something going on that side of things.
Yeah, and we know the peace conference will be taking place later.
Indeed, and what Russia is saying is that this move by the EU is a double standard policy which directly affects the prospect of having an international peace conference on the topic of Syria. So the timing is very interesting, but the bottom line is that these are old contracts, existing contracts for a defensive weapon for the Assad regime.
Okay, now another question here is, can Russia's defense systems be used to influence events on the ground in Syria?
The short answer is no, but obviously it's a little bit more complicated than that. The S-300 is an air defensive weapon, and it cannot be used in ground-to-ground combat. It can't be used against the rebel forces, if you will. It's specifically designed for air combat. Now, Russia is using this as an opportunity to reiterate that point, something that they've been saying all along. Now, the controversy, of course, is the international community looks at this as Russia is siding with the Assad regime. They're arming Assad. This is not the case. As we mentioned before, these are old contracts.
Yes,
you
carry on.
You see that, Matt. I mean, you see that. We don't have to keep playing these clips. Look, there is an arms race on both sides, and it's not just arming rebels and arming the Syrian government. They are arming each other, moving less weapon systems, getting things in place for World War III.
See, and ladies and gentlemen, and Joe and I have had this conversation, and in fact, he's been privy to some pretty high-level conversations. Look, we, the Americans, your sons, your daughters, your brothers and sisters and parents and whoever who are serving in the military are going to be toe-to-toe with not only the Syrian army, not only the members of the Assad army, if you will, but Russians. Think about this for a moment. And at the same time this is taking place, and folks, please understand how serious this is. At the same time we are going to be fighting this war, we are also currently fighting a currency war. Now, don't forget, part of the takedown of the Soviet Union involved a monetary attack, an attack against the ruble. Now, I'm not going to get into too much. I can't. But what you're seeing play out is the blowback from what we're doing in Syria was not only Benghazi, that was the blowback, but the computer hacks of banks and also the currency wars that we're involved in right now, and the killing of the dollar from without and within. It's a complicated three-dimensional chess match that you've got to understand we're involved in. Where we're headed with all of this is we're going to see things take place in Syria. That's going to expand regionally. That's going to involve Israel. We will not be able to go to the aid of Israel. Why? Because at the very same time that breaks out, you're going to have mischief taking place in the South China Sea, in the Sea of Japan, and in other locations. We're going to be so spread out that we're going to be pretty well neutered. And as I've said before, folks, what is this all about? Or what more how much more is there to this? Well, think about this. Since our dollar is not backed by anything of value, that is to say gold or silver, it is the world reserve currency for one reason, or reserve currency for one reason only, and that is because it is attached to oil. Once there is a threat, it doesn't even have to be acted upon, but once there is a threat to the free flow of oil and energy, get used to paying $7, $8, $9 a gallon at the pumps.
Get used to walking. I mean, really.
Well, and paying for extreme amounts for your food and such, and all the fallout that happens.
Yeah, not only are we facing a World War III scenario that's been building up over the last few years, not only are we facing an economic crisis that seems to be spiraling out of control in super slow motion with one inevitable conclusion of collapse, but now our infrastructure in the last week. And this, guys, remember, this is important for Thursday's show and the last show we did with Nathan Liao. His dreams about the trains and the Civil War. In the last few weeks, we've seen some train crashes. We've seen some bridge collapses. And this today.
Begin this hour with breaking news. Good to see you. I'm Brooke Baldwin. Let me take you straight to Baltimore to these live pictures. Massive explosion here on the train tracks in Baltimore. Here's what we know right now. This is a cargo train. We know hazmat teams are on the scene. What was in the train? We don't know. We're getting better pictures here closer to the ground. We have learned that one person at last check was trapped in all of this. We've seen firefighters on the ground responding, of course, EMS in what looks to be some sort of industrial area of Baltimore. I have Chad Myers, who's been watching this. And Chad, look at this smoke. I mean, we've seen black smoke. We've seen white smoke. But you have seen, what, a truck in addition to this train?
I believe just up the track from where this derailed is a straight truck that is on its side completely tipped over, that was smashed by the train itself. I know it's hard to distinguish just debris from debris, but that right there is not part of the train, I don't believe, unless...
And as you cannot see the video, obviously, what they're referring to is a accident that happened today in Baltimore, where a train was derailed and it took out several buildings, and I'm not sure if there were any dead, but there was one or two people trapped in the wreckage as the freight train derailed in Baltimore after colliding with a commercial truck on Tuesday afternoon, sending a huge plume of smoke billowing from the flaming wreckage. 15 cars from the CSX-owned train were derailed, and 2 were on fire following the accident, according to Baltimore County officials. The Baltimore County Executive, Kevin Kamens, told NBC affiliate WBAL that only one person was injured in the accident, and that was the truck driver. He's in serious but stable condition. 2 employees on the train were not injured. Hours after the collision, dark and thick plumes of smoke could still be seen from miles away as the 2 train cars burned. The cars were carrying, this is a new word, teraplastic acid and another kind of acid in the Baltimore County Fire.
I've never heard of that. Yeah, I've never seen that word before.
Hagmann said that they were not toxic inhalants. Either way, the flames couldn't be put out by fire or water, I think they were saying, I was watching on live feed and they were talking about the magnesium. But we are seeing so many things happen. And I watched there's another video you can find on RT. It's about our infrastructure. And it's talking about how the sinkholes, not just the bridge collapses and the train derailments, but the sinkholes that there's one in downtown Washington, D.C. that popped up. There are, and they estimated, and whoever this group was estimated that they would need $3.6 trillion to repair all the roads and bridges in the U.S. up to safety-approved standards.
Yeah,
by
the minimum standards.
Right.
Yeah, and I remember driving, this is, oh my goodness, probably 15 years ago, driving through New York State and having a bridge collapse not too long after I had, I'm talking maybe within a day or two after I had crossed the bridge. I was in upstate New York, and it killed a number of people, but the infrastructure, the money that has been put aside for the infrastructure has not been used for that purpose. We've not upgraded our infrastructure.
No, we use it for sending weapons to the Muslim Brotherhood, and instead of feeding the homeless and hungry veterans and widows, we send it to radical jihadist groups so they can bring terror down on their nations. Isn't that what we're supposed to do?
Of course.
Yeah. Isn't it humanitarianism? Isn't that spreading, freedom?
Yeah, here's a drone packed with MREs for the hungry. Yeah, exactly. But the reason that Joe played that, and we thought this was pretty important, is when you hear Nathan Liel talk, and you heard him on our last show. If you haven't, you can go back and check him out. He talks about three different visions, if you will. One involving a train, and well, I had talked to him off air here. A couple of days ago now, but when you take what he says and match it up with this particular incident that happened in Baltimore, you're talking about a train that went off its tracks and skidded alongside, kind of like like a swath, making a swath, taking out buildings with it. And when you hear Nathan Liel talk about what he saw, or what was shown to him, basically, it's eerily similar. So now, regardless of what
there's going to be new revelations when he comes on Thursday.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
He's going to put it together in a fascinating way. When we talked on the phone this weekend, I wanted him to come on Monday, but
yeah, when we that's right, because you talked to him independent of me, and I talked to him independent of you, and he said kind of the same thing. But I got to tell you, when he did connect things together, as he will on Thursday, it made for an interesting picture,
insight, into what could possibly come and how soon it could possibly come. And I know we've got a couple minutes until the top of the next hour. I want to do this now. For the second hour, we're going to have a guest. Her name,
Suzanne Purcell.
Yeah, Suzanne Purcell. She's going to be coming on, and she's going to be talking about a number of things. She's an investigative researcher. And one of the things she's going to be talking about is the huge amount of children being put on big pharmaceutical drugs and how some government agencies that work with the police departments partner up in taking kids from their homes, the child services and things that we've had people on that have talked about, and but this will be much more in depth, and it's going to be a great second hour.
Yeah, and Joe, I got to tell you this, and I didn't tell you this before. It was rather serendipitous. I thought that she would come on tonight. I did not know, and we didn't know before the show that. I mean, we did. It was kind of tenuous, but folks, I got to tell you something. There's something going on here with our government, the children, the big pharma, all of this together. That all of this ties together. Even when all of this ties together. Listen to what she's got to say, because it makes a lot of sense. And our children are our future. They're our, they're our future. And what's more important than our children, really, when you come right down to it, on the physical plane here? And when you hear what she's got to say, I think you're going to be surprised at the level of knowledge and about how all of this connects. Like I said, the big pharma, as you mentioned, Joe, the police, oh my goodness, it weaves an interesting tale. Yet it connects everything together, and there's so we're very pleased to have her on as a guest during the second hour. I didn't mean to stretch that out, but I just wanted to make sure people understood that this isn't kind of taking away, but adding to what we're already seeing here in a more cohesive manner. It connects some disturbing trends that we've seen. And I've been getting emails of late that talk about what she's going to be talking about. So it's going to be an interesting second hour, to be sure.
Yeah. And in other news, before we take our break, we have Christian discrimination happening in, where is this? Christian discrimination cases rejected by a human rights court. 3 British Christians who argued their beliefs saw them wrongly disciplined by their employers for actions such as refusing to counsel same-sex couples have lost their legal battle at the European Court of Human Rights. Gary McFarland, Lilith Lindale, and Shirley Chaplin had their appeals to the Strasbourg court rejected in January as part of the same ruling as that which Nadia Edwin, a British Airways check-in attendant who won her fight against being banned from wearing a cross at work. The 3 sought to resolve the matter in the court's grand chamber and final arbitrator. However, judges in the court have rejected the request, in effect ending the legal battle. So what has happened here is the court has ruled in the employer's favor in 2 out of the 3 actions, saying that the obligations to prevent discrimination against people using their services was not the case, and that they did not break any rules or human rights issues. The UK has the world's most comprehensive equality laws, which already include strong protection for religious beliefs, and they would have been fatally compromised, particularly for the lesbian, gay, transgendered, bisexual people, had the Grant Chamber overturned any of these judgments, according to counsel. Kristen, I'm sorry. No, that was not right. But the Christian Legal Center. This is the National Secular Society that said that. Now, okay. The bottom line here is that they are basically saying that, you are not being discriminated against. If you're gay and somebody doesn't like that for their religious beliefs, it's not discrimination. You are committing a hate crime, pretty much. You don't get the time of day. If you're wearing a cross at work, I mean, we're seeing this happen in Europe. This is going to be the way it is here. You're going to not be able to have a Bible in the streets or in public. You're going to not be able to say the name of the Lord out loud. If it continues the way it's going, if something catastrophic doesn't happen to where things change very rapidly, which a lot of people think that that's the way it will happen. But we are seeing a shift at a pace never before seen, where countries are not just taking God out of the curriculum, but offensively attacking his laws and trying to make people go against them.
And the reason this is important, folks, for Americans and for Canadians, people in North America, or people in westernized countries, is the fact that this is the Rothschild plan. And at the end of the string, if you follow the breadcrumb trail to the end, you will find that this is the European model, the Rothschild model, and, of course, who's taking after that but Obama, Clinton, and it's coming to America. It's coming to the West.
Folks, you're listening to the Hagmann and Hagmann Report this Tuesday, May 28, 2013. We will be right back with our guest, Susan Posley. I get that right. Susan Pozel. Stay with us.
Hi folks, Doug Hagmann here. You might know me as the co-host from the Hagmann and Hagmann Report, or as a frequent guest on Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie. If you're like me, you're tired and confused over today's headlines. You just don't know where to turn for accurate, concise information about really what's going on, what's truly going on in today's society. If you don't know where to turn for accurate, well-researched, and properly vetted news, I've got a suggestion. In fact, it's a requirement. Bookmark Canada Free Press. That's CanadaFreePress.com on the internet. It's just not for Canada. It's for news across the world. Judy McLeod, founding editor, has put together a vast array of talented writers like Kelly O'Connell, Daniel Greenfield, Dr. Eilena Johnson-Powell, a lot of guest columnists, very talented writers. Folks, that's Canada Free Press at CanadaFreePress.com. Now mobile friendly. Follow on Facebook, because without America, there is no free world.
Podcast. It is May 28th, 2013. This is the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. I'm Doug Hagmann. With me is my co-host, Joe Hagmann. Together we are the Hagmann and Hagmann Report, the fastest growing radio program across the internet. I've got to tell you, it's interesting because as we were preparing for tonight's program, we were talking about different individuals making a difference here, whether it be with our children, with getting information out, and who the movers and shakers are in the world. And we did come across a name, Suzanne Pozel, or Posel, Posel. She's got a website, occupycorporatism.com, and we're going to link her website up with ours after the program. But Suzanne is the chief editor of Occupy Corporatism and the globally syndicated host of the Region 10 Report broadcast on American Freedom Radio every Thursday from 1 to 3 p.m. Pacific time. Now, that report is syndicated on the Prepper Broadcast Network. And a year ago, Suzanne began writing articles about the information she researched on the New World Order. Oh, haven't we all? Welcome to the party. Anyway, the website, Occupy Corporatism, was born from this research, discovering that everything is incorporated and that this is a major part of the problems we face in the world. And since that time, Suzanne has expanded out to touch all aspects of the control the ruling elite use to coerce the masses into compliance. And isn't that what we see taking place today? Of course it is. And because of this, she believes that non-compliance is the answer to combating the New World Order. And folks, we wholeheartedly agree. Now, Suzanne has had numerous articles published dealing with a wide variety of subjects, from eugenics, climate change, the hoax behind it, and martial law, something near and dear to our hearts, the technocratic banking elite, once again, not enough rope, not enough trees, and Second Amendment rights. She is one of the most integral research journalists and sought-after radio guest in the alternative media. She's the author of over 1,200 articles. She contributes to several well-known alternative news aggregator sites and is a founding member of the Real Guerrilla Media, which is an organization to bring together honest and unco-opted activists in the alternative media movement to network with each other, give coverage to those who are truly affecting change and exposing, well, shall I say it, scumbaggery. She's been featured on various radio shows, including but not limited to the Vinnie Eastwood Show, the Corbett Report, United, no, I don't believe that's the one, WWIII News with Charlie McGrath, and very others. And with that, we want to welcome to our program Suzanne Posel. Suzanne,
hello.
Welcome. Hello.
Thank you. I'm so tickled pink that I'm on your show.
Well, we're tickled even pinker to have you. But you're a busy lady. My goodness, what haven't you investigated? You kind of came on. In fact, I've read some of your articles. I was talking with our producer earlier, and he was saying a few things about you. And I remember reading an article and seeing your name affixed to the article, and it was about the New World Order and specifically eugenics. And the reason it caught my attention is it had a flavor about senior moments like I'm having right now, Alzheimer's, I believe it was, or the slow kill. And I think, were you on Alex Jones here? Haven't you been on Alex Jones recently? Or am I mistaken?
No, when I first started posting articles, I was contributing to Alex Jones's InfoWars and Prison Planet, and he read several of my articles when he does that little overhead cam where he shows you, oh, I've got all these stories. Well, several times a week, my story was actually in there, and I would watch the episode just to see him do the overshot and pull out my article and say my name on the air.
Gotcha. All right. Well, Joe and I are, my son Joe, the co-host of this program, or the host, I'm the co-host. We're not sure which roles we play, but we're glad to have you. What's on your radar today? What are you focused on right now? You got the New World Order. You got everything taking place. What's going on in your world?
Well, I wrote several articles. One of them about Pepsi. They linked that people who drink excessive amounts of diet soda end up with a condition with their teeth that is identical to people who have had long-term substance abuse problems with meth or cocaine. And I found that very interesting. So I wrote an article about that. Yes, they did a study with, it was just a general study. They wanted to, it's a preliminary before they do more, but they took a couple of people who drank 2 liters of Coke a day for like 3 and 5 years, every day. And then two gentlemen, one who was a former meth addict and one who was a former Coke addict for about 18 years. And they found that they had the same dental problems. And they attributed it to the acidic nature in the diet cola. And they didn't say Pepsi or any one particular. It's all diet cola. Now, I could sit here forever and explain to you why you should not be drinking soda. Okay, I'll just give you 3 words. Flame retardant. I've written several articles about it. I was telling people about it way before they were, that anyone else was really talking about it, except for certain circles, but bringing it out to the general public. And then early this year, I saw that a 12-year-old girl had put up a petition on change.org, and she got several 100,000 signatures to have this flame retardant taken out of Gatorade. And so Pepsi came out and said that they were removing it from all of their soft drinks. And everyone said, all of their soft drinks? Did you just say all of them?
Okay. Yeah, now you're talking about, Sarah Kavanaugh, a 15-year-old from Mississippi who began a petition to have this flame retardant material, which I didn't even know was in there, removed from Gatorade because the ingredient was used, again, as a flame retardant. Now, one of the things, may we call you Suzanne? Is that right,
yeah.
Susan? Or okay.
No, Suzanne is great.
Suzanne, okay. One of the reasons we asked you on tonight, or to have you on tonight, is we talk about abortions, we talk about the children, we talk about the children, of course, are our future. We talk about very heavy things here. We also talk about health, nutrition to some extent, but we really don't have anybody that we can turn to with respect to what's going on with our kids and how our children are being dumbed down intentionally. It's something here that we have got to look at, because this is as Alex Jones says, there's a soft kill here, and of course it's directed at our children. A lot of it is anyway, as well as us. Maybe we're too far gone, I don't know. But what's your work with the children here, with their, whether it's dietary, whether it's the dumbing down of children, or because you've done a lot of research. I'm looking at your website, and once again, folks, occupycorporatism.com. I'm looking at your website, and you've got a lot of things on there, but one of the underlying themes is the dumbing down and the actually going after our future. Our children are our future. So is that a place you want to go to, or what's, again, the Pepsi soft drink issue is for all of us. But is there something specific? Is there something specific, though, with kids that are taking place, or is it all of us? Is it or is there something very specific with children?
Well, we have to go back in time to the early 1920s. And over the weekend, I put out 2 articles. The first one was entitled 9 Ways the First Amendment is Used to Promote Censorship. The second one is probably the one you're referring to, Dumb Down Our Children, the Connection Between Drugs and Psychology. And the one that I wrote about the First Amendment prompted me to write the one about dumbing down our children, because as I was researching the different ways in which people misuse the First Amendment, it got me on a line researching how we have systematically redefined words in our culture. And
that's Joe's big thing, too, about the First Amendment. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
Oh, no, absolutely. I'm appalled every time someone uses the First Amendment to justify an egregious act that is obviously not permissible under the First Amendment. And for them to do that, especially if they're in a place of influence or prominence, what that does for the audience is they redefine it in their head. And as it's repeated with the wrong definition, it keeps getting redefined in our heads, to the extent that the meaning behind the First Amendment, why they made it the First Amendment, what the Founding Fathers meant when they put it in there, and the way in which they put it in there. And that's why I included it in the article. It got me thinking, well, it's not a First Amendment. Amendments are amendable. They are changeable. It's an article. And that got me thinking, wow, here I am. We can say it's an argument of semantics, but when I get into the dumbing down of the children, you'll understand why that one little thing is so important. Because it's an article. It's not an amendment. It's not something that is negotiable or changeable. It is a statement that this is a part of the rules and regulations that we will create this country based on, and these are the outlined rules and regulations that we want you to follow under the blanket of our constitutional republic. And there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is not the society. The problem is the people controlling the society. Having a society and having things that we all agree are not right, there's nothing wrong with that. It's the people who are in control is the problem, because they do this very thing, change it from an article to an amendment. And so it has a different connotation to it. Everyone understands that word differently than calling it an article to calling it an amendment. It's dumbing it down. It's effectively teaching you that what you innately are given under this constitutional republic is not innately given. It's a privilege, and it can be taken away.
Interesting. Okay. So it's semantics we're dealing with here, and it's like attempting to have an intellectual discussion with people who are unarmed. I mean, intellectually unarmed or disarmed, I should say, in a great way. Now, one thing, and I know I'm kind of jumping around here, but we have, and I want to thank you so much for giving your time to us. One thing that caught my attention and caught Joe's attention is something you pointed out back last year. And again, forgive me for jumping around here, but I think this is so important for people to understand. Joe pointed this out to me and was jumping up and down and pointing at the computer screen. I couldn't understand what he was doing, and I looked over. And it says public schools use RFID chips to track and punish students for, get this, pre-crime. What's this all about?
It's part of the system. The system, before I say that, let me just say this, and then eventually we'll get back to this, because it is all connected, folks. This is a holistic problem. It's not one problem and one solution, and then when you solve that, the problem goes away. No, they're on all fronts completely. It's all fake. Every single aspect of your life is fake, and I don't mean any exception to that at all. And once you get that, you'll start to understand. But with the RFID chip, they've taken it a step further, where at first they were using psychoanalysis to control the children. They've realized that since the experiments that were going on in the late 1960s, early 70s, and all of the movements toward freedom, the self-help movement, the women's rights movement, the civil rights movement, all of these movements were corporatized and co-opted. And part of the problem is there's a lot of dissonance going on in the movements, and rightfully so, because for X amount of decades before that, we were all repressed, and we couldn't express ourselves, and it wasn't right to talk about that. And you never talk about politics and religion, and don't talk to Aunt Susie about that, and never mention that to Uncle Joe, and children are being seen and not heard. There was so much repression going on, and then in the late 60s, early 70s, we exploded, and it came out as an explosion. There were all sorts of crazy therapies. Well, these children, as generation has their children, now the children have become very uncontrollable. And so they feel that at this point they have to start implementing Big Brother control systems in order to make sure, track and trace these children. And it's not just on campus, it's off campus. There was a bunch of elementary school students last year who got a wristband because they were trying to see, it had to do with physical education and how healthy the children were. But this wristband, they were told not to take it off even when they got home. And it was RFID chipped, which means it was GPS located, and all of the information can be siphoned out of the chip remotely. There could have also been cameras installed in it because, cameras are so small. And these children were to wear these bracelets 24 hours a day, I think, for like 2 or 3 weeks or 6-week period. And the parents became very upset. That's why I wrote the article about the RFID chip, the swipe, because I had worked at a hospital probably close to 10 years ago, and I remembered having my badge, and it had RFID chip in it, and it knew if they wanted to know where I was in the hospital, they would be able to know. And it got me thinking, oh my God, so they're going to know exactly where their children are, and not just geolocating them, but monitoring their behavior, monitoring their interaction with each other, taking all of this information in so that they can better control the children.
Wow. That's frightening. And I know Joe has been my son has been very hot and heavy in terms of looking at this RFID, the entire issue of the RFID chip, especially in terms of Obamacare or the Affordable Health Care Act and all of that. But when you're talking about this as a way to control, my goodness, that this is rather frightening indeed. I didn't mean to knock you off track there. We were talking about something totally different before I did. If you want to circle back around, what's the bigger picture here? What's going on? You said that nothing is as it seems, and we're living in the Matrix, basically. What do you mean by that?
Well, I started looking into Edward Bernays, and Jamie Romero, who runs American Freedom Radio, recommended that I watch The Century of the Self to get a lot of information to research. And it's a 3.5-hour documentary. You can watch it on YouTube. I recommend it highly. Watch it a couple of times because I had to. And it goes right through Edward Bernays, and it shows how we have been completely programmed from a self-sustaining culture, which we were before the crash, and a desire culture. And
okay, Suzanne, I'm sorry. Give us the name of that documentary one more time, please.
The Century of the Self. And
the Century of the Self. Okay.
And put in full length. It's about 3.5 hours long, and it's worth it, definitely. One of the things that came out of that, which was very interesting to me, was this shift between self-sustaining culture to a desire culture. And the way that they did that was when the corporations went to Bernays, they said, how do we get people to buy products? And he said, well, you don't get people to buy products. Well, what do? You get them to become emotionally attached to that product and that brand and that company. Then you don't have to ever get anyone to buy anything ever again. They will buy it simply because you sell it, or because that brand name has a reputation. That's why your reputation is everything. They tell you on one hand to work really hard. On the other hand, they tell you your reputation is everything. Because your reputation actually is everything. We are taught in the schools from very early on that how we feel is more important than logic and reasoning. And the way that they did that was when Ford and Carnegie and Rockefeller got together and created the public schools. They came up with a problem. They wanted to know how to better take these children who were self-sufficient on the farm, working and learning, and turn them into a desire culture. And they found out that they needed to use Freudian behavioral psychoanalysis techniques in order to get that done. And so they went to Edward Bernays, and they talked with him. And they employed Wilhelm Reich, which was an Austrian psychoanalysis at the turn of the century. And his claim to fame was, his ideal was the neurosis is its prevention rather than treatment, which means the actual disease is inconsequential. The symptoms are what we should be focusing on, and this is the problem we see with the medical industry. They don't treat the disease, they treat the symptoms. They have a list of symptoms. If you check off, 6 out of 10 or 7 out of 10, they know what prescription to write down and hand it off to you, and there you go. And you're still sick, but you don't feel sick because what you're taking is masking the symptoms. And somehow you keep getting sicker and sicker, and your life keeps ebbing away, and yet you're taking all of these pills to treat all of these symptoms and all the symptoms that the pills cause. But with psychoanalysis, they want to just focus on the symptoms, and they don't use any medical reasoning or deduction. They say you have a chemical imbalance. There are no tests to find out whether or not you actually have this chemical imbalance. But once they decide that you have a chemical imbalance, they look at the symptoms and they check it off, and they, proverbial draw a line and say, oh, well, you're schizophrenic. Oh, well, you're bipolar. Oh, you have ADHD. And we have a drug for that. And so they write the prescription, and there you go off on your merry way with your drug. You've been diagnosed. There's no proof that you have this problem that they say that you do, but they said that you do, so you've got the prescription in your hand and you start taking the pills.
Man alive. And by the way, I just want to say, folks, we have posted, with your permission, Suzanne, your article, Dumb Down Our Children, the connection between drugs and psychology, on our website at homelandsecurityus.com, with a link directly back to your article, to your website as well. But I think it's important for everyone to read this. Go ahead and continue on with this, because once again, our children, Joe, I mean, you're going to have kids. I mean,
she's exactly right. And going back to what you said about, the problem isn't society, it's the people who control society. I do agree with that to an extent. I do agree that the people have been really conned by their own laziness, by their own content with where they are in life. But we have a ruling class that has shaped how they deem society should be and should act. And this, with basically the dumbing down of Americans, the children and adults, through big pharmaceutical companies, is definitely a huge problem. And sadly, it is just one way that they use to control people with, aside from all the other methods that they use. But their social systems that they have put in place, their control mechanisms, have captured people into a virtual jail cell. And I just wanted to say that, the people who control and construct this false reality are taking and deceiving a lot of people and ruining people's lives.
Absolutely they are. Absolutely. And so when I was looking into this, what sparked it, again, I want to reiterate, the way we use words is very important. That's how we communicate. And that everybody understands that this word means that your communication with that person is all the more better. Oh, that's terrible English. See, there you go. I've been dumbed down. But
I'm sorry. Somebody had used that very phrase last week with me, more better, but that's okay. Actually, it was my dentist, but go figure. Go ahead.
So we have a problem where we don't understand the words that we're speaking. And I'll give you an example of the dumbing down. When my mother went to school, high school, part of her electives were to take a shorthand class because it was expected if she entered the workforce that she would be a secretary. And she was taught to only use shorthand when she was taking down dictation or in lectures, and that you would take it home and transcribe it into something that's legible. Well, now we have text, and ironically, the shorthand has become the legible text. And to me, that's incredible. That's within, from my mother's generation to mine and beyond, that we don't use the whole word. We use an acronym or one of those little smiley faces.
Yeah, and you would be talking, too, about, like, LOL and LMAO or whatever that stuff is. The younger generation is groomed in that fashion right now.
Absolutely. And so, you don't write the whole word because when you're texting it, you get carpal tunnel, so you write C-U-Z. And everybody understands that means because or cuz. Because that's how it sounds. Now, ironically, and I'll get into this, with phonics, ironically, we're starting to, when we use this new shorthand, we spell things the way that they sound and not the way that they're actually spelled. And it's interesting to me that we reverted back to a crude version of phonics. But let me get to, in the 1940s, let me take us back to the 1940s. There was a gentleman named Jean Piaget, and his last name is Piaget. He introduced the theory of development. And he decided that children had a 4-stage maturity ladder that they needed to achieve in order to have cognitive capabilities. So before they achieved that, essentially, they had no cognitive capabilities. They're not able to, they're literally incapable of having a logical thought. They said any child under 11 must be taught with concrete objects and examples.
Okay.
That's why we baby talk to our children. It's more the educational toys that are sold to the children now. Like I have a 2.5-year-old daughter, and I have a 6.5-year-old son, and the toys that were purchased when they were born and every Christmas since then are all very easygoing toys. There's absolutely no challenge. You just get a little block and you try and fit the shape into there, and if you do it, yay, and if you don't, oh well, you'll try again. The toys talk to the children. When I was teaching my son to read, his grandmother bought him a Leapfrog, a pen that read for him. And this was supposed to teach him how to read. And I thought to myself, well, how is he supposed to learn how to read if somebody's reading to him and for him? Okay, anyway, let's go with this. Well, one night, my son comes out to my husband and I and says, I can read. And he's holding one of the Leapfrog books that the pen would read for him. And we were all excited. I got out the camera. I was going to videotape. I caught his first steps on videotape. I was sure going to catch this on video. So he sits down to read. And he did something very, very interesting. My husband caught on to it first before I did. As he read exactly as he had heard the pen read. Every inflection was exactly the same. He mimicked all the different sounds of the different voices for the different characters, exactly as the pen did. Every time the pen would get excited, he got excited in the exact same way that the pen did. And about 1/3 into the story, my husband tapped me on the shoulder and said, he memorized what the pen says. He's not reading. He memorized it.
That's a great point.
Yes. And I thought, oh, no. Because when I was young, I was taught phonics. You have to sound out the word and learn the sound combinations. And I said, oh, no, I have to focus on phonics way more. Oh, my God. We didn't say anything to our son, and he reads chapter books now. But it wasn't until I started implementing phonics and teaching him the sound combinations and getting him excited about it. I said, the letter S is an incredible letter. It can turn anything into a plural. Isn't that neat? It's like a superhero. He's not memorizing words anymore. He's not memorizing letter combinations. He is, and they'll tell you that our brain doesn't actually read the page. It looks for combinations and associations, and then through electrical signals, you know that word is the word that you're reading, but your brain doesn't even read, so why should you? That's what they'll tell you. They've done studies to back that up.
Let me ask you this. I've seen these tests, these exercises, where somebody will take a paragraph and they'll take letters out of each word, or maybe shorten words pretty much, where if you really looked at the words, you would not know what they were. But if they say if you can read the paragraph, you're very intelligent, or it has something to do with you're intelligent. Now, is this whole word reading? Is that what they call this, or is this what we're talking about, or is this simply, now as you mentioned before, word memorization? I mean, am I off the mark here, or?
No, it does have you're right. It's called whole language. It originally started with look-see or whole language. Those are the terms that are used, but you're absolutely correct. They decided that your brain will memorize words, so why are you learning to read? Your brain doesn't read. And so they started teaching, when they took the phonics out of the classroom, and they took the children's ability, but remember, this is training from a self-sustaining culture to a desire culture. And they are teaching the children that emotional response is more important than the actual facts. How you feel about the answer is more important than the answer itself. So they don't want these kids, yes.
Now, how does that work with math? Yeah, never mind.
Well, they have 2 plus 2 could equal 5. Everyone gets a gold star. You don't want anyone to feel bad. Everyone at the T-ball get together or game, everybody gets a hit. Everybody gets to run the base. They don't actually keep score. I've got a neighbor whose son plays with my son, and she just put her kid in that T-ball class, and she was telling me about how great it is because they don't keep score, and everybody gets a turn to hit, and they keep hitting until they get it, and then they run around the base, and it's wonderful. And the kids are happy because their self-esteem is up, and the parents get to socialize, and all around it's just a wonderful time. And I thought to myself, no, absolutely not. Sorry, but sometimes you lose. Sometimes you're not. Yeah.
Exactly. I happen, one of my favorite, I got to tell the listeners, it's one of my favorite sitcoms is Everyone Loves Raymond. And there was an episode where they were playing T-ball and, or, so, I don't know, some type of baseball, T-ball thing. And they weren't keeping score except for, you know, the grouchy old guy, Frank. he was keeping score. And to me, it was just hilarious because, you know, just how insulted these progressive thinkers are, you know, when you keep score. But I didn't mean to. Once again, I took you off track here. But wow, and you're talking about the redefining, and I've used this term in this program before, the redefining of how we operate, of everything. I mean, my goodness, this is really, when you think about it, at this level, training children like this is huge.
It is, and it goes all the way back to the 1920s, and it really kicked off in the 1940s with this theory of development. Because under the age of 11, well, the kid can't possibly have a logical thought. They can't possibly be independent. Let's go down to their level. When my children were born, both of them, we told everyone, do not talk down to them. Do not baby talk. Because if you don't say the word correctly, how are they going to learn how? They are monitoring us. They're watching. They're seeing how we behave around each other. They're learning how mommy and daddy relate, what kind of words we use, how we use our words. So they need to hear the word verbalized correctly. And if not, don't talk to my kid. And we told our family members this too. And both of my children were speaking at a very early age and speaking correctly. They don't have any speech impediment whatsoever. They don't have a problem with their L's or their R's or anything like that.
My goodness, that's great. And I've got to tell folks, definitely bookmark occupycorporatism.com. If you go to homelandsecurity.com, there's a news article right on the front page there, and we're going to put up that, of course, you were a guest on our program, but you've got so many stories, from facial recognition, the government, censorship, cybersecurity, false flag, surveillance, politics, United Nations. I mean, you name it, it's there. But near and dear to our heart, and you know, our topic tonight is the children and how the children are being remolded. Who's behind this?
Well, this was a combination of Rockefeller and Carnegie and the Ford Foundation getting together and realizing that Sigmund Freud had it correct. In the 1954 annual report of the Rockefeller Foundation, they highlighted communication and did research on its ability to influence people with psychological mechanisms. So language then becomes an assault. They're using language in order to get you to think in a different way. And one of that is the redefining of words, because we're taught to have emotional response. And once you react, they've got you. And I mean that, folks, in a literal sense. And some of our reactions are unconscious. And they've already, if you've been through public school and even private school, I found that even religious private schools, some of them will take subsidies from the state in order to subsidize, maybe they gave out, let people come in on half a scholarship or whatever it is. They get that money, that difference, from the state. The state gets it from the federal government. The charter schools, no good. They are completely controlled by the technocrats and the UN. And the Montessori, La Petite Academy, and KinderCares are all owned by J.P. Morgan Chase. So effectively, if you don't want your child to be programmed and dumbed down, you need to get them out of the school. There's no, in my opinion, there's no safety.
Wow. Did I just hear you say Montessori is
Yes, Montessori.
owned by J.P. Morgan Chase?
Yes, sir. Yeah. And La Petite Academy and all the KinderCares. And the KinderCares work with mostly low-income families. And, yeah.
Wow. Okay, that's something I did not know. So in your investigation, it sounds like you worked just like a detective, like we work. You follow the money. I mean, it's a money game in part, and then it's the reformatting the brains of our children, I guess, teaching them to think in a totally different fashion.
Or not to think, yeah.
Well, teaching them to think in a different fashion, because if it used to be that you watched the news, then somewhere somebody came around and started a show that was purely their opinion, and they were a prominent broadcaster, so people paid attention. People were interested in finding out what that person actually thought. But then that took off, and all of a sudden, all of our news became opinion, and that's okay. We understand the news to be opinion because we were taught at a very early age, we were programmed in our schools to think of things on an emotional level and not a logical level. So now a person's opinion is a fact. And it's all been blurred and it's all muddied. And you can't tell when the broadcaster is giving you facts, when the broadcaster is interjecting their opinion. And you see that in articles. One of the things that I do with my articles is I never put my personal opinion in them, because I saw that a lot of alternative news articles are really op-ed pieces because they don't know what an article really is. And so I didn't want the audience to read my article and be swayed by my opinion. I wanted them to read what I had found, link it back to as many original documents as I can find on the internet. And if you're ever curious, if you get the title of a document, just put PDF at the back of the search when you go into the search engine, and I found congressional documents going all the way back to 1962, and other documents. I found the Balfour Agreement just sitting there, PDF, if you're ever curious. So I wanted people to not base an opinion on what they read because I put my opinion into it. I thought the facts should speak for themselves because it's shocking enough. I can't make this stuff up.
Wow, I've got the utmost of respect for you. One of the things I do is, my opinion a lot of times is evident in the articles I write, for better or for worse, most likely the latter. It's there. But that said, being able to recognize the difference is key, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And when you can't recognize the difference because it was programmed out of you, what they do in the schools from, preschool, kindergarten, first grade, all the way to 12th grade, is they spend all of these years getting you out of you. And they're not trying to create a blank slate. That's too messy. They did that with MKUltra and they did, experiments with some people in Canada, and it's way too messy for that. But it's very easy to get people to be emotional about things because we are emotional creatures. And it's very easy to get people to feel good about themselves because that's what we all want. And so if you teach people to go after what makes them feel good and always have an emotional response to something, and don't pay attention to logic because you go with your gut. Go with your instinct. How do you feel about this? Never mind what's actually being presented to you in factual, documented, and annotated evidence or sitting in a box right in front of you. How do you feel about that box? How do you feel about that amount of that giant amount of information that all proves you wrong, how does that make you feel? And so the person is not paying attention anymore to that box of evidence, and they might never even look in that box. You could almost guarantee that a large percentage of people won't even look in the box because it's all about how they feel. And that's the end deal. We buy things because it makes us feel good. If you want a status symbol, you buy a Benz or a Mercedes or an Audi. If you want a status symbol, you shop at high-end department stores. You carry around a Louis Vuitton bag, even though they're absolutely horrendous.
What does that say about my 2001 Chrysler minivan that doesn't have a working door and I got to crawl through the window? Never mind.
Yeah. You touched on a lot of important points, and what I want to talk about, expand on if we can, is the dangers of teaching people to act on emotion instead of logic, to act on impulse, as you said, for feel-good sake instead of being dependent. I mean, it's like the people on this earth put value into things that have no value, where things that have the most value are free, yet society views it in a different way.
Well, people buy things because I made the analogy or the example earlier. You can buy a coffee maker. You'll buy a more expensive coffee maker. All the coffee makers, every item that you purchase has a built-in death date. It's called planned obsolescence. Everything you buy, every shoe, it doesn't matter where you bought it, or if it's a Jimmy Choo shoe, or if it's a shoe that you bought at Kmart, it doesn't matter. It's all built in. It's got a birth date and a death date, and it will fail. And they know this. Planned obsolescence was one of the most brilliant things they came up with because it's constant consumerism. Everyone's purchasing a coffee maker at different times in their life, and they are guaranteed that people will buy coffee makers again. Now, with different brands.
Oh, man. You just made so you're telling me the coffee maker I have right now that I'm drinking a cup of coffee on, this could be my 4,352nd cup of coffee. You're saying that maybe at 5,010, it'll stop working, regardless. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yes. Everyone listening to the broadcast, pull up a search engine and put in planned obsolescence. And I don't know how to spell obsolescence. I don't remember off the top of my head. But go look that up. There's a wonderful documentary about the light bulb and Thomas Edison, which explains, it's actually a documentary about planned obsolescence because the light bulb was the first item that they did this experiment with, and it worked so well that all corporations do it. Everything you purchase, everything, period. There's no exception.
Wow. It's truly, I've never heard of that before, and I've got to tell you, I'm very surprised. I don't know, maybe not surprised, just to hear it. Look, tires wear out, shoes wear out, appliances wear out, but to know that there's a death date, to me, that's rather disturbing to me. Yeah, and that's so people will buy a new one, right? Not get the old one fixed because it's probably you can't repair it.
Well, absolutely.
Oh man.
Absolutely. Most men are they may have a toolbox. They go to Sears and they buy the craftsman tools, but they don't know how to fix anything. I happen to be married to a man who can fix anything. So when the coffee maker breaks, he fixes it so it works. He goes in there and reworks the gear so it works. But absolutely, every item has a birth date and a death date. So what they do is they do questionnaires. They want to know how you feel about the product because they go statistically around the spectrum and decide how many people are going to buy the same product, What percentage of people will get upset because they spend all this money and they'll go buy the cheaper product? What percentage of people will be upset because they bought the cheap product and they'll go buy the more expensive product? And they know exactly how you behave because they ask intimate details about your personality, so they know how many people, what type of personality you are. When you go to purchase something, it's a marketing sales technique. I'll give telemarketers are taught that you have to ask a question at least 7 times before you'll get an agreement or a yes. If the person is not going to say yes at the first time, what you do is you talk to them about the product, and then you say, at the end of the little spiel that you have, you say, well, can I have your credit card number and let's ring you up for that item today? They say no. You go back and ask them how they feel and what's going on in their life. And you always end the conversation with, well, how about I take that credit card number now and I will ring you up. Eventually, after 6 times, on the 7th time, they'll say yes. And they started doing this insidious thing to the students, is giving them tests, which were actually questionnaires. And they told the students that there were no right answers, but there actually were right answers. A mother in the 80s, and at the end of that article that you've talked about, the Dumb Down Our Children article, is a 27-minute or 30-minute video on a mother who, it looks like the early 1980s. It's a VHS on YouTube. What she says is absolutely mind-blowing. She found out that her daughter took this test. She went to the school board. She said she was told that she was not allowed to get a copy of the test because it was a closed test and nobody was allowed to see it. Well, she kept fighting them and fighting them and fighting them, and finally they not only sent her the test, they sent her the answer sheet. And she was told that there were no right answers. And what she found were the right answer was any answer that facilitated the ideology of going with the flow, of going with the crowd, of doing whatever your friend said, except if you were going to directly disobey your parents. Then they would encourage children to go ahead and go with what their parents said. But if you were not directly disobeying your parents, in all instances, go with the flow, just go with the crowd, just do whatever your friends are doing, be cool, be the river, not the rock, don't stand up for yourself, just be part of the crowd. To children, what they did with this information is they took it to the colleges. Just like in the 1940s and the late 1920s, when they started implementing psychology into the classrooms, they did it by way of the teachers. In the colleges, the teachers were taught how to manipulate the children to get them to comply, not only with the structure of the classroom, but with the information being disseminated. They didn't want you to raise your hand. They didn't want you to ask questions. They wanted you to memorize what they wanted you to memorize, learn what they wanted you to learn. And I use the word learn loosely because you're not learning anything. You're not critically thinking. And pass the test and go about your merry way and graduate and go on and get your slave job and believe in the white picket fence and the 2-car garage and your wife with your little dog and your boy and your girl and go chase after the dream that you're never going to get. Because remember, it's not about how hard you work. It's about your reputation. Because everyone is training.
Rigged. Yeah, I'm sorry I had to throw that in there because the game is rigged ahead of time by the very measures, some of the very measures you're speaking about.
Right. We've got a nation of people, several generations, who are absolutely 100% programmed. And I'll give you an example personally. I cut my hair 2 years ago for Locks of Love and sent it off, and I'd grown my hair out for 4 years, and it was long, and I loved it. When I cut it off, I was happy that I did it, but I was sad because I missed my hair. And it's taken me 2 years, and my hair's growing back, and it's starting to look like it did before, and it's still too short, but it's nice. And the other day, I saw a woman who had a beautiful short haircut, kind of like a shag haircut, and I've cut my hair that way several times throughout the years. And I thought to myself, wow, I should go get my hair cut. Now, I don't want to cut my hair because I was very sad for a year until my hair got to the way it is now. It made me upset. I missed my hair. But I'm programmed to see something else and have an emotional response to it and then try to incorporate that into myself as an expression of myself. That's one of the little games that they played during the late 60s, early 70s with the self-help movement. The way in which they co-opted and corporatized it was that idea that I'm doing things that make me feel good, I'm expressing myself, and that what I wear is an expression of who I am. And what labels on all my clothing and all my accessories and my car is an expression of who I am. My car is an extension of who I am. All the toys and everything I've amassed, because I'm programmed to be emotional toward my things. Because if I'm emotional about it, then it's guaranteed by the corporations that I'm going to keep purchasing things because you're never satisfied. And there's always something new coming out.
Very true. And folks, if we take a couple of steps back and look at the bigger picture, look at the big picture of what Suzanne is talking about here, we can see how we are playing in a rigged game. We are definitely in the matrix here, and we can apply what Suzanne is saying to all aspects of our lives, individually and collectively. And wow, she's got so much to offer here.
Yeah, and as we see society, the morale of society continuing to decline, the behaviors of the people continue to decline, the mentality of the people of being entitled to things, the rudeness, the hate, the intensity of all the negative problems we are seeing in our society. And, we see, not only are we seeing a generation after generation of children being taught to be like this, they're also being fed enormous amounts of drugs to make sure that they behave like this. And we have a chat room, somebody in our chat room talked about how children don't read anymore. And that's right, they play video games. I mean, the more technology increases, the more people can unplug in an unhealthy way, where there is unplugging from society in a healthy way. We see this break from the way people are supposed to treat people, the way people are supposed to feel about other people, and there's this lack of connection between humans to the point where we have a society we live in today, which is completely morally, spiritually bankrupt.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Now, Suzanne, let me ask you this. Can we twist your arm to stay on with us for another segment here, perhaps even take some calls? Can we do that?
Yeah, I'll stay as long as you want. You guys are awesome.
Well, thank you. You're awesome, too. And, folks, I've got to tell you, I've got a question on the other side of the break. I've got to ask you. It's about MKUltra, the Wizard of Oz, and mind control. How's that for a teaser? But in the meantime, folks, you're listening to the Hagmann and Hagmann Report live this 28th day of May 2013. I'm Doug Hagmann. With me is Mike.
To our third hour of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report this Tuesday, May 28th, 2013. We are joined by our special guest, Susan Posel, the chief editor of Occupy Corporatism, also the globally syndicated host of Region 10 Report, broadcast on American Freedom Radio Thursdays 1 to 3 p.m. And I will post a link to her website in the chat room, and you can find the information about her under the About Us section. Very interesting hour we had as we were talking about the effects of social engineering done by globalists as they attempt to lobotomize our future generations of children to the point where they are basically, as V said the other night, worker drone zombie bees. Worker bees.
Yeah, this is the same thing that V and Steve Quayle have been saying, and with her permission, we've taken her article called "Dumbing Down Our Children: The Connection Between Drugs and Psychology," put it on the front page of our website with a direct link to her website, folks, and also her email address is on there. If you have any questions after the show, send them to her. Let her know that you heard what she is saying on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. Let her know and send her appreciation for appearing on our show, because I got to tell you, what she's got to say is really important. And during the break, I was talking to Joe about this, but let me ask you, Suzanne, and by the way, welcome back, and thank you for agreeing to stay for a little bit longer. What do you know about MK Ultra? Probably too much, probably more than you want to, but I was doing a lot of research in mind control, the occult, and the wonderful world of Disney. And the things I found just blew me away. Have you done any research in that respect?
Absolutely. Well, I have two small children, of course. When I saw the cartoons that were available to my kids, I said, oh, no. What did I watch as a kid? And I have a daughter. And so I wanted to show her movies that I watched as a kid and things that I liked. And we had a lot of Disney in the house. So when I saw these YouTube videos where they break it down frame by frame and show you all of the subliminals that are going on, there's a film called Consuming Kids, and it talks about advertising in children. And one of the things it talks about with regard to Disney is, I'll give you the Beauty and the Beast example. Beauty and the Beast is a story about a woman who gets kidnapped and locked away and forced to have a relationship with this man who is a beast. And he abuses her. He threatens to kill her father. He won't let her go. And she eventually acquiesces because at some point during the music montage, he hands her or does something cute, and she thinks to herself that it's really not his fault. You know, he's just a beast, and maybe he had a bad childhood, or maybe he had some things go wrong in his life, and he's just misunderstood. And if I just love him enough, then he will become the prince. And she does. She loves him right into a prince, and at the end he becomes a prince. That message to children, especially women, young girls, is absolutely devastating. If you ask yourself why your friend or your daughter or any woman that you know stays in that abusive relationship, there you go. It's conditioning women to think that if you just love a man enough, if you just do everything he wants, he'll change. You can change him. Just keep doing it. Keep working hard. It's the same thing they tell you at your job. If you keep working hard, you'll get that promotion. The problem is that people decide to change of their own volition. Some instance may trigger it, but people choose to change. You know, when I tell people, when they ask me, well, how did you wake up? I woke up because I decided to watch a 6-hour documentary on the crash in 2008, and that's when it hit me. Oh my God, the fiat, it's not money. There is no money. It's all fake. But nobody forced me to watch that. Nobody turned on the light for me. I did it for myself. And so this message that they send to young girls is absolutely horrible, and it contributes to the abusive relationships that women end up in and stay in and go back to, and then some of them end up being killed by these men. Because we are sending messages like in Beauty and the Beast to our daughters, that if you just love him enough, he'll change. You just gotta love him.
Suzanne, do you see the actions taken by these people to make people so suggestible, basic zombie-like behaviors? What is their end goal? What is their end purpose, or what will they achieve, they being the constructors of this society, or
the
destructors? Yeah, what will they achieve by having a population that could care less about anything but their own selfish, materialistic, and feel-good attitudes?
Well, John D. Rockefeller said, I do not want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers. And there it is. If you are selfish, you're going to work hard so you can get that money, so you can go give yourself that reward at the end of the week. If you wait until Friday and you celebrate and you come home and you're tired and you sit on the couch, even though you've been sitting in a cubicle, basically in a little cell all day, but it feels so good to take off your shoes and sit on the couch, and maybe you pop open a beer, and maybe you're going out to the movies with your friends and you deserve it. And maybe you're going out shopping with your girlfriends the next day because you deserve it. And maybe you're going to go to the spa and get some massage and relax because you deserve it. That's what they want. Because when you work tirelessly all those hours for that week for basically what would pay for your basic sustenance, it's not anything extravagant. You shift around your finances in order to pay for the things you deserve because you have been programmed to think that you deserve it. Go ahead and buy it on credit. Oh, that was the wonderful, brilliant idea that came out with in the 50s, buy it on credit. You don't actually, not only is the money, the physical representation, the dollar bills, the $100 bills, the 20s, that's all fake. It's not there's nothing backing that. You can't walk into a bank now like you used to and say, I want this $5 bills weight in gold, or I want these $2 bills weight in silver. You can't do that anymore. In fact, I remember when they told us all to turn in our $2 bills. Do you remember that?
No, the $2 bills, no.
Remember, they wanted them all. They were just weird, and they weren't in circulation anymore. So if you got one, go ahead and turn it into the bank. I remember that. I was a little girl. I was always looking for a $2 bill in my change so I could give it back to the bank.
Interesting. Well. Again, we're looking at this, and ladies and gentlemen, our very special guest, is Suzanne Pozell, OccupyCorporatism.com. Check out her website; it's connected to our front page as well. Suzanne, you ready to take some calls from listeners? We got some people who want to ask you some questions. Want to talk?
Absolutely.
You up to that? All right, we can rock and roll.
I love talking to the audience. Yes.
All right.
For those who want to call in, the number is 661-244-9839.
It's actually unlisted.
We do have people on hold. We're going to go to 719 first.
Yeah, people on hold. We don't screen our calls, by the way, so just want to warn you.
719. You're live on the air.
Hello. Yes, it's me, Donna. How are you guys?
Fantastic.
Good, Donna.
Okay. I have a question. I noticed I have 2 grandsons, and I noticed they do these tests. I had children a long time ago. I don't remember these tests. And, can they put blocks together? Can they do this? On these infants, is that something new? Is that part of what you're talking about? And if so, could you explain to me how that fits into what you're talking about? And then I'll get off so other people can call, and I'll take the answer offline. Okay? Thank you.
Absolutely. Give me the first part of your question again. I couldn't hear everything.
Thank you.
The first part was the testing that they have right now. It appears more physical, where you have to fit shapes together and such. Is this part of the program as well? I believe that was her question. Joe, am I right? Were you paying attention?
Absolutely it is. Because remember, children before 11 they're absolutely incapable of logical thought. So don't bother to tell them anything where they would have to sit down and think about it, because they just don't have the cognitive capabilities. That's what was decided in the 1940s. So young children are given simple toys to basically just satiate them or give them something to literally play with. And they will be entranced by it, and they won't bother you. And you don't have to worry about the child's education, because you're going to send them to school and they'll learn. So let them be a child as long as they're a child. We heard that with the self-help movement in the 70s, when Dr. Spock came out and spewed out all his garbage. So we came to the idea that kids only have a short amount of time to be kids, and let them be kids and let them play and let them have a good time, because soon they'll have to go to work and they won't have a good time, and they'll have to get up at 6 a.m. and they won't like it. So let them just have a good time now. Well, the danger of that ideology is, before that, when children were at home and when children were learning at home, they also have responsibilities. A lot of children grow up on farms. And you have to go milk the cow when it's time to milk the cow. There's no discussion. You have to go feed the chickens and collect the eggs at a certain time, otherwise they're going to step all over the eggs and break them. You have chores that you have to do. You have to prepare. You have to know what the weather's going to be like in the afternoon so you can prepare for it in the morning with certain plants. If it's going to get hotter in the afternoon, you have to water them now and give them shelter so that they can withstand the heat and not die. So you have your crop. And these are things that are not negotiable. And children learn this at a very early age, and it didn't impair their ability to enjoy their life. But when they took the children away from the parents and put them in school, it became a very laxed ideal that you had opportunities to do things. You had chances to do things. We see this with the reward-based system that we have. And I gave into this, actually. Before I'd woken up, my mother told me, go watch Super Nanny. She's incredible. So this was before we threw away the television. And my son was a little boy. We haven't had a television in our house for 9 years, actually. I thought, wow, how great. I will start him on a reward-based system. And the reward board does not work. What it taught my son was every time he does something that he should do, he will get a reward. He has chores, even at 6.5, that he has to accomplish. He has to take out the trash. If he doesn't accomplish it, he thinks or if he does accomplish it, he thinks he's going to get a reward for it. My daughter, when she was an infant, instead of doing what I did with my son, which was satiate whatever need I thought he had, I taught her sign language. So I knew exactly what she wanted, whether it was a dirty diaper, whether she was thirsty, whether she was hungry, whether she just wanted to be held. My communication with my daughter is much more in sync than it is with my son. Even though my son is at home and we homeschool him, there's this barrier that I created very early on in his development, where I didn't understand what his needs were because I wasn't teaching him how to communicate to me. And I did that with my daughter. So my daughter is very communicative. She puts herself down for a nap. She tells you when it's time for things. When we're at the park, the funniest thing is, like, when she's done at the park, she will get right up in her stroller and start to strap herself in. And so I say to my son, okay, we're done. Let's go home.
Wow. That is interesting. I've got a question that was sent to me from Gary, Mississauga, Ontario, Canada. Asked me to ask you whether this whole process of programming, of conditioning our children from an early time, from decades ago, that began decades ago, is the end game of this, if you would want to call it that. And of course, I'm paraphrasing from his email. Is this what we're seeing now, where we've got a group of adults and young adults and middle-agers, if you will, who are acting in compliance with things like the TSA, for example, where they have no moral objections to going out and to violating a person's rights, personal rights, their constitutional rights in America, for example. They seemingly have no conscience. Is this a byproduct or an end product of this conditioning?
This is the conditioning coming to fruition, and I don't believe that it's over. But it's evolved to this point where we're starting to see it manifesting in our culture. And that's exactly what it is. What man would stand in a line for X amount of hours to allow another man to touch his wife inappropriately? That would have never happened several decades ago. That guy touching the wife would have ended up on the floor before he knew it. But we acquiesce. Absolutely, right. We do, because we were taught that how we feel about something is more important than the actual answer. Remember, the how we feel about the answer is more important than the actual answer. So
right. Now we have same-sex assaulters now, however, where in the airports here in America we've got women on women and men on men. It doesn't make it any less, any better by any stretch.
No, and that's part of the conditioning. They make you feel better about it because it's a woman touching a woman. I'll give you an example. When I was about 9 years old, I decided that I didn't want to go to my pediatrician because he was a man. I didn't feel comfortable in dressing. So my mother brought me to her doctor, who became my doctor for many years later. And because she was a woman, I felt more comfortable. Now, I was raised by a woman who burned her bras in the 1960s and was very much a feminist. And she wanted me to never depend on a man, always have your own job, always, if you're going to go on a date, always make sure that you have your own contraceptives on you because you can't trust a man to make a right decision. He's going to do whatever he feels. And ironically, I became a housewife and a stay-at-home mother because I saw the flaws in that ideology and how it affects the children. And being a child of a single mother who was teaching her daughter to be independent and a feminist, I realized when my husband and I decided to get married and have children that I didn't want my children to grow up like that, feeling abandoned, feeling like you always had to defend yourself, not feeling comfortable in the situations I was in because I couldn't trust the people who were around me. So, because when you grow up in a home, when the baby boomers decided that they were going to get divorced, they started using irreconcilable differences. And I think I fudged that word when I was saying it. But it basically is a catch-all. I woke up in the morning and I didn't like the way you looked, and so I'm going to file for divorce on my lunch break. And basically that's what happened. And it became a cultural thing where it was unheard of that the man and the woman stayed together. Then it became, let's just live together. And then it became, when my husband and I got married, and both of the children are from him, and we all have the same last name, people are shocked that we're a family. They keep expecting one of the children to have a different name or be from a different father, and my husband adopted that child. That's why they have the same last name. It's very shocking to people that we're all a family, a traditional family. But the way in which they teach that out of you and teach the consumerism and teach the compliance is by redefining words, imbuing social memes, giving you the appearance that you are doing what's best for yourself. And if everyone's doing what's best for them, the community deteriorates. It's destroyed. It's instant. Well, it's instant in the sense that it's generational, and within maybe 1 or 2 generations, you're going to see what we see today, which is people just saying, okay, well, I had an emotional response to 9/11, so I understand that we're on this indefinite war on terror. So even though I don't like it, I'm going to go ahead and allow myself to basically be molested and violated in order to get on that flight. And it's as simple as that.
Wow. Very interesting. Now, I got to tell you, ahead of the calls, I've got probably a dozen emails here from people, and their wording varies slightly, but I've got to ask you these questions. Fritz Springmeier had gone into a lot of research, done a lot of research into deeper insights into the Illuminati, for example, talking about mind control, talking about training, even training the unborn child. The Illuminati work with children, twins, the trauma-based mind control. There are a lot of questions from listeners surrounding this. Without reading the dozen or so questions, and I can do that, but before I do you have what are your thoughts on, for example, mind control here by the Illuminati, using our children, specifically our children, as, the slaves, if you will, developing Manchurian candidates even. What are your feelings on this?
Well, they absolutely do. The doctor's name was Cameron, Ewan Cameron, up in Canada. And the CIA chose Canada because at the time, in the 1960s, Canada had a lax legal system, which was advantageous for them. They couldn't perform these LSD experiments here in the United States because they'd run into some problems. What Cameron did was he wiped the slate clean. The people that he were taken under his care, and I use that word loosely, he completely wiped their slate clean with LSD and electroshock therapy. And it wasn't as successful as they thought it would be, in the sense that the people who came out they didn't know how to go to the bathroom, they didn't know how to speak, they were babies. They had to be taken care of. They had to be taught all over again, every single thing. All the first 2 years of your child's life and how you had to basically do everything for them. They had to teach them how to hold their head up. With general mind control, I see it it's a lot easier to get people at an impressionable age. And as soon as you take the children away from the parents and you've got them for 4 or 8 hours, whatever you say goes. And because the children at home are taught to respect their parents, they don't question authority. They don't question their teacher. And the ones that do are dealt with, either pharmacologically or through some kids don't get to go to school anymore. They get suspended from. I've known children who got suspended from the entire district, and these are not bad children. They just didn't comply. A lot of parents are running into psychologists who are called counselors in the school, and the teachers and the principals are now recommending that your child go on some sort of mood stabilizer, even before you get to the psychologist, and as a condition of the child returning back to class. Now, I found something interesting, and I'm kind of going off topic, but in school, when the school psychologists started to show up in our schools, was around 1969, and there was about 455 of them. In 1992, there were over 16,000 of them. And it's also correlated with the amount of violent outbursts from children, ranging from elementary all the way up to high school, and ranging in all spectrum of violence on themselves with suicide, violent acts towards their fellow students or the teachers, and violent acts towards property on the school, like burning down the school. These incidents have started rising as they put the psychologists and the psychiatric community into the schools as more children were being given mood stabilizers, which they readily admit that they don't know what's going on. In fact, they openly admitted that earlier this year, and I wrote an article about it because Obama came out and said that he wanted to start an initiative just like we did with the human genome. And one of the gentlemen who worked on the human genome, who has ties to the Eugenics Society, is working on this brain mapping project because they admit that they don't understand how our brain works. They don't understand how the neural net works, how the receptors in our brain works, the electrical impulses, the chemical bio network that's going on in our brain. And they want to map out everything so that they can understand that. Well, why would they want to do that? Because the psychiatric community is probably, and this is my opinion, getting sick of being accused by other people in the psychiatric community of even the National Institutes of Health. Then I'm kind of digressing here, but the new DSM just came out. Now,
Joe knows about that. Yes. Thank you for bringing that up. Go ahead.
And some of the things in there, when I wrote the article, I was just shocked. Some of the things that really shocked me was if your child has regular temper tantrums, they now have a bipolar disorder. And I can't remember what the term of it is. 4 letters, or 4 words, I'm sorry. Bereavement now has to be monitored almost from the point where you lose the loved one, because bereavement could turn into a deep depression. And so everyone who is now mourning the loss of a loved one, you're under monitor. You know, your friends and family are being told to monitor you because you could suddenly become very depressed and maybe commit suicide. And they want to prevent that. And the psychiatric community is all about prevention. They know that there's no disease going on, so they're treating symptoms. So as soon as you're just crying a little bit too long, maybe it's been 6 weeks since your husband of 28 years passed away, and someone decides that that's a little bit too long to be sad. So they make a phone call, and all of a sudden you've got a mental disorder, and it facilitates pharmacological treatment.
Wow. And this fits very nicely, by the way, with how we see our returning veterans being treated with the mental post-traumatic stress disorder and so on and so forth. Suzanne, I want to make an announcement real quick here. Because of the storms we were having, our telephone board was knocked out of service. So I just want to let people know, trying to call into the program, you won't be able to. So you're off the hook, Suzanne, in terms of taking phone calls. Go figure, the storm of the night. But so yeah, our whole board was just knocked off because of the storm. But okay, moving on here. I am so I'm looking at this. Let's digress a tad here. And really, it's not digressing. But when we're talking about gun control, you're talking about the various states and even the federal government raising the bar or lowering the bar in terms of mental disorders or mental health issues. This is all part of a larger agenda, isn't it? What we're seeing here, this melding. What's your take on that? I mean,
I've got an article coming out tomorrow because I caught this in the news. Just the CDC puts out a study, and I reported on it. 1 out of 5 children in America has a mental disorder. The next week, the DSM-5 comes out with all these ridiculous redefining of normal, natural, emotional responses to life are now, even more of them are now mental disorders. And then today, I see an article, 1 out of 4 children from military families have a mental disorder, and we don't know about it. And we need to start reviewing them, monitoring them. It goes through... gives tips to parents, and you'll see that in the article if you go to occupycorporatism.com tomorrow morning, teaching the parents to monitor their child with a checklist of what to look for. And the first line of response is the pediatrician. The pediatrician who works for the medical industry, who is hooked up with the pharmaceutical industry, who gives the psychiatric industry purpose. And if you observe any amount of these symptoms or more, I don't remember what the number is, like 5 out of 10 or something like that, call your pediatrician, and they will set up an evaluation. And all of a sudden, little Johnny or little Susie has a mental disorder, and they looked at children from as young as 13 months all the way up to 18. And they're going to give children of 13 months psychotropic drugs that they don't understand how our brain works and how the receptors work and how the chemical reactions in our brain create the emotions that we feel and base our actions. And we've been taught to be emotional. So we've been taught to do everything based on emotion, and yet at the same time, the pharmaceutical industry is doing everything they can to stamp out those emotions. Because as soon as you have feelings, if they're just too intense, if it's just a hair over the line, it might be indicative of a mental disorder. And so they've got to preventively treat that before you actually have that full-blown disorder.
Yeah, and on this DSM-5, I know that they and the DSM-4 started with the spiritual people who believe in God as a mental disorder. And I have not read the DSM-5 in detail except from little bits and notes about this. What has anything changed or increased in the spiritual disorder category of the DSM-5? Have they, laid more guidelines out to say, people who hold religious beliefs should be considered to be ADD or, I don't know, they have this new, like you said, the dependent, I forget the name of the scientific verbiage that they use to describe this quote-unquote disorder, but it was almost like people who need a crutch have some kind of, or have a belief that they are in touch with a superior entity or the Lord, that they are classified as being mentally ill. Have you read or come across that section?
I didn't see anything new, but I did see something interesting along these lines, where we're seeing a huge movement toward normalizing homosexuality and transgenderism. And the redefining of transgenderism included that it was now the other people's mental disorder, not yours. You being transgender is natural. It's you didn't choose that. You were born that way. And the people who have the problem with it, they have the mental disorder. And so that would encourage lots of people to go, I don't know, maybe rat out or suggest to people in authority that this kid is bullying me and he doesn't like me because I'm transgender, and so let's go evaluate the kid down the street and see what his mental problem is.
No, okay. Because I have a quick follow-up question. Go ahead.
So do I. And this can be answered probably pretty quickly if you know the answer. A person in our chat room, Cold, said, now that they're making everything a mental illness, will there be disability payments for these new mental illnesses?
You know what? I don't know, but I'll go look that up. I have no idea.
Okay. Well, boy, you got some homework here. Now, my question goes to something I remember Alex Jones talking about, and I don't recall the substance used to line, for example, the soft drink cans, the plastic, for example. Okay. Are we? Does this have anything to do with anything here? Because it just seems to me like I'm getting a lot of bits and pieces, and they're starting to connect. So maybe you can explain how BPA plays into this mind changing, altering state here, if you will. Because I've heard Alex explain it, but maybe if I hear it from you, it might resonate a little bit differently.
And I just want to preface everything that I'm going to say by saying that it's holistic, folks. They're getting you on every front. It's not just if you get rid of, this is a hydra. You cut off one head, two are going to grow back. With BPA, it is an estrogen-based chemical. So it adds estrogen to the male chemical makeup that is foreign, and so it feminizes men. And in developmental stages, that is absolutely that is 100% detrimental to a young boy who is developing his testosterone levels to have estrogen in his chemical makeup of exorbitant amounts on a regular basis. It's going to create a man who is not what we used to call, maybe John Wayne, a man. He'll be effeminate. He won't be the traditional way we assume to be a man. In a woman, it over-feminizes women and contributes to breast cancer and ovarian cancer and reproductive problems. And this absolutely.
Wow. Well, the reason I asked that question, because I got to be thinking about this when you were talking, and I probably should be paying more attention, but this is something that really bothers me. You've got the majority of our population who are heterosexual in nature. I mean, 97, I don't know what, 97, 90% heterosexual, normal, husband and wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever. The sexual attraction is the heterosexual. But now we are in the closet, so to speak, although the 97% is not homosexual, there's really much less cultural support for the heterosexual institutions of the family, of the motherhood, of the fatherhood. Obama just came out and said, the heck with Mother's Day, the heck with Father's Day, it's Family Day. But anyway, all of this, it's an assault on our masculinity, on our femininity, the life events of marriage, birth, and child rearing, all of this. What we're seeing here is, once again, the redefinition, but this is being helped, if you will, in my view, along with what you're saying, is the artificial components like BPA and other things, along with, and if that's not bad enough, you've got the assaults by the schools and by these academia that, hey, this is the new normal, so we're getting it from all fronts, aren't we?
Absolutely. Well, the audience would do good to look up the UN Human Rights of the Child. And in that document, it explains children have the right to eat what they want and do what they want, and their parents do not have the right to say no. The child can emancipate themselves, get divorced, from their parents. We saw there was a movie with Drew Barrymore in the 80s that glorified this. She was like 12 years old and she divorced her parents. You remember that movie? Brian O'Neill was in the movie too. I don't remember the name of it.
They just, in fact, I if I'm not mistaken, they just replayed that on Lifetime. The name escapes me, but thank you for bringing that up. Holy cow! So so you're bringing a lot of these things together here. This is an assault. This has got to be coordinated. I mean, what we're seeing here has got to be coordinated on a larger scale, does it not?
It has to. Absolutely. When you go back and, if you ever want to know, this is what I do. When I want to know who is involved in a corporation, I go on the NASDAQ and I look at the private trades and I see who has controlling or voting stock. And I'll just give you a little tidbit. Last year, I entered this into one article I wrote about climate change. But I found that Evelyn de Rothschild just purchased 70% voting stock in the Weather Channel. Well, there you go. The next time you were watching the Weather Channel and they're talking about how humans and CO2 and biodiversity and extreme weather and it's all your fault, just remember where it's coming from. So if you want to know who is controlling a corporation, and it's always the same people, just go on the NASDAQ and look at the private trades and see who has controlling stock, who is investing the most money into it.
My goodness. Okay, again, something new learned here. I did not realize that one of the Rothschilds was vested in the Weather Channel. I mean, for crying out loud. All right. We are living in the Matrix. I mean, really, when we look at this. Do I dare ask you what your belief is? And we're going totally off script here, and we've covered so many points. And thank you for being such a good sport about this, because we really didn't have a script in front of us or any questions eked out in front of us. But if what we're seeing is all fake, I mean, what are we to make of it? And you mentioned your awareness, becoming aware in the 2008 economic fiasco. Where do you see us going with our economy right now? I mean, are we not at the precipice of total economic collapse right now, and people are still buying their big box TV sets and iPads and iWhatevers? I mean, isn't this what's going on right now?
Absolutely it is. QE3, when I took a look at what Bernanke was saying, I had recently written an article about how the UN was doing this massive land grab in Africa. And I thought to myself, well, gee, if I was going to steal the land from the people, and 1 out of 3 homeowners statistically is a registered gun owner, I can't really do what I'm doing in, thinking like these people think. I really couldn't do what they're doing in Africa, where they just storm onto the land and burn down the huts and kill anybody they can and force the people off the land. Because if you did that in a city here, 1 out of 3 is a registered gun owner, you might get shot. So how am I going to do that? Well, when I looked at what Bernanke was doing, I said, oh, this is how he's doing it. QE3 is all about purchasing from the banks who created the debacle themselves with the mortgage-backed securities. He's purchasing the mortgage-backed securities. He's purchasing the deeds. Now, I have a friend who works in helping people stay in their homes up in Washington, and she works for a law firm, staffing law firm, and they are doing wonderful things, helping people who have been foreclosed on stay in their homes and fight legally. And I asked her, well, how many of these, she's been working in it for a year in this industry, and I said, how many homes, how many pieces of property, because it's not just the homeowners, it's anybody who owns a piece of property is affected by this. I said, how many homes and pieces of property were securitized? She said, nobody knows. Everyone in this industry is assuming that every single piece of property, if it has a deed to it, it is securitized, including people who own their property or their land or their house for 10, 20, 30 years. And it's paid off. And they're getting letters in the mail from 5 different lenders. How can you have a mortgage agreement with 5 different lenders all at the same time? Bernanke is purchasing all of these mortgage-backed securities from the banks to become the biggest landowner in the United States. And when he's done, the central banks, the technocrats, will own the entire land here in the United States. Eventually, that's like QE infinity.
But what with it, though? But see, okay, my question is, let's just say I had a house that was paid off mortgage-free. Oh, good heavens. Can't wait. But let's just say that is true. How does that affect me?
Well, what they're doing is they've got several urbanization with ICLEI and all of these NGOs that are coming in and imbuing Agenda 21 at the local level. What they want to do is, if anyone listening has seen that map of the United States that the professor did in the 1970s, where he outlined the megacities where the little black dots, most of it is uninhabitable for humans, non-human use. There are buffer zones. They're building these Agenda 21 shoeboxes, these huge high-rises all across the nation. Mayor Bloomberg just put in for a huge high-rise to be built in New York. They have them in Boston, in San Francisco. They have them here in Portland, Oregon, where I live. And they are 222 square feet. In San Francisco, they're 150 square feet. In Japan, in China, they have them, and they are just basically a little casket where you sleep. And that's the end game. Agenda 21 is the end game. Where you live in a megacity, it's a densely populated area. You have a little tiny shoebox that you live in. You go to your slave job. You clock in. You do your work. You come home to your little cubicle or your prison cell. Go to sleep and get back up and do the same thing. That's the end game.
Wow. I'll tell you what, Suzanne, we've learned a lot from you tonight. We're up against the closing moments of the show. And I just want to thank you.
It was fantastic for not talking to you or meeting you before the show, for you just to come on, and we had an excellent conversation, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, but I got, you had a little bit kind of a vacation because the phones went out, but that's okay. But I got to tell you, folks, OccupyCorporatism.com. It's linked from our front page. The headlining article is the dumbing down of our children, and that's really the core concept here, because our children are our future. But Suzanne gets into so many other areas of research. You're going to be doing this full time, right?
I do, and
wow.
but I also homeschool my kids and take care of the house. I'm a full stay-at-home mom, so I do this mostly when the kids go to bed at night and stay out 12 hours a night.
and you're still functioning. I can't believe that. Well, I just want to thank you, Joe, and I want to thank you for coming on and educating us in the ways of the different things that you've talked about tonight. There's so many things that we've got to research and to learn. And let me ask you, hopefully you'll agree to come back on again. We'll be a little bit more focused with certain issues like Agenda 21 and ICLEI and other things that need to be discussed, and of course, the children. Would you agree to come back on and spend some time with us at some time in the future?
Absolutely. I had a great time. You guys are amazing. And I was just tickled that your producer called me and asked me to come on. I was excited.
Well, it's great. I'll tell you, we've got we've got the best listening audience in the world as far as I'm concerned. They're really up on so many things that we're experiencing, but you have a lot of great answers, and your perspective is one that adds a certain flavor to our program. So I want to thank you very much for coming on. I want to say God bless you, and until we talk again, you stay safe and keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much. I look forward to coming back on. Thank you, guys.
All right. Folks, that was Suzanne Posel of OccupyCorporatism.com. That's OccupyCorporatism.com. You got to visit her website. She's got so much information packed into that website. I couldn't believe it. I was going all over the place, as you could tell, obviously, Joe. I have ADD. By the way, folks, we might have a surprise for you tomorrow night. We're trying to work something out. It's at the last minute. Joe, you know what it is, right?
Yes, I do, and I told the chat room the possibility, but wait and see.
Yeah, who knows?
Nothing's locked in yet, but we're working on it.
Yeah, well, I'll just come right out and say this. If possible, we might have Greg Evenson come on tomorrow night. And then, of course, Thursday, Nathan Leal. Holy cow, buckle your seatbelts. But I just want to say that tonight was an interesting night. We kind of took a left turn, but an important left turn because what was said tonight was so it connects some dots that are just bubbling under the surface. And she's right, though. Man, Joe, she is right. What you see is not really what you're seeing. I mean, things are not as they appear. That's one of my favorite sayings as an investigator. Things are not always as they appear. It's something else.
And if we can't get the show going tomorrow with the guest, we're gonna be getting into some different subject matter. I got something planned that my dad doesn't even know what I got going on. So,
of course.
It will be good regardless. I hope we can get Mr. Evenson on, but if not, we are going to have a great show, a listener interactive show, and it'll be a little bit different than something we usually do, if we have the time. If not, we'll do it next week.
Okay, and I want to say this, too. We're just putting together on our website, HomelandSecurityUS.com, Century of Self, which Suzanne mentioned before. I'm kind of intrigued by that. So you can learn more about it via our website, HomelandSecurityUS.com, Century of Self. It's a unique documentary that shows how people can be turned into consumers. And, oh, boy, it's pretty interesting. But with
folks,
that,
don't forget,
back to you.
Keep everybody in your prayers, even the people that we perceive as enemies, as we cannot lose our joy because of what other people are doing. All we can do is what we were asked and called to do, which is uplift each other and spread the word of the Lord. But we have to make sure we cannot let these people or what they're doing take away from our spiritual happiness. And with that, all of you have a great night and stay safe.
One last thing. I got to sneak this in, okay? New product, American Survival Wholesale, now offering this emergency grab bag. It's a durable bag that can be thrown over your shoulder to keep your hands free during a disastrous situation. We're gonna have more on it tomorrow, but just check them out, American Survival Wholesale. You got to take a look at it. Great product. But that said, and of course I blew right over to you, Joe. Sorry about that. I want to say thank you for listening. And once again, let me ask the question: what have you done today to prepare to get one step closer to getting your preparations in order? Whether they're practical or spiritual, both are equally important. Good night, everyone.